And can I welcome back Deborah, who is going to join us, Paul, once again, and also please welcome Anis Ben Mahmoud, who is the Chief Executive of United Robotics Group France. Yeah, okay.
I'll go over one.
Do you want to come and join me on this side? Yeah, take a seat. Yeah. Anis, welcome. We may need to share microphones. I'm not sure who's got a microphone on, but we're good between us. And so we've got a bit of time here to chat through some of those issues, and they've given me a title here, so we'll come on to that in a sec. I've got loads of questions for all you guys, but I really want to open it up to the room as well. So please have a think about if you've got any questions for anyone in the room. I will come out amongst you with my microphone, and the usual caveat applies. Please make sure it's a question and not a statement or a rant. Please put your hand up and I'll come and find you, and please let us know where you're from and who the question is directed to. Sir at the back, I will come to you in just a sec, so let's jump in. But please do stick up your hand. I want this to be as much about you as it is about my questions, because yours are probably better. But Anis, welcome. Nice to see you too. And I was just talking there with Christina about bringing in different industries into aviation and say, look, we have some of the answers for you, and that's what you do. Talk to me about when you go and work with aviation partners and you go in and say, I've got an answer to one of your problems. What does that look like?
Oh, it's a large question. So it depends what we want to do. Actually, what is the most complicated with airports when aviation is that we have an existing structure that we cannot change as easily as other industries. So we have to start with what exists and to adapt it and to add solutions, okay? And today, technology is more affordable than have ever been. It's also more reliable with GenAI, with robotics. So we can change a lot of things with a small investment. It could be like understanding the traffic and adapting the way we are going to handle all the facilities. It could be in easing the operations for ground handling, for luggages, for example, which is a pain point for a lot of people. It could be the same for customers in order to enhance their experience. So we will adapt, we will fit to the ecosystem, I would say, and sometimes try to make it easy. Otherwise, we will have great ideas that is impossible to roll out on the field.
And expectations have shifted, though, aren't they? What customers are coming to an airport, they want more. They are used to more in other industries. And is it fair to say, perhaps, and this is maybe a question for all of you, that airports struggle to keep up with the pace of innovation in other industries just because you're dealing with some legacy infrastructure? I mean, is that the case? Deborah, Christina?
Well, I think not just legacy infrastructure, but regulation, right? And we don't get to be a large big box store that is sort of pivoting on a dime. And we also, in some cases, struggle with the workforce that's going to show up and move quickly to implement some of these solutions. But we can be doing more. I mean, I think there's a lot. We've seen it. Look at what they do in Dubai and in other parts of the world. We know that more is possible. It's just a question, really, I think, of that whole tired saying, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. It doesn't always scale.
And as you described it to me as, robotics or what you can offer is like giving someone a calculator. The problem remains the same, but you make it easier for them to deal with that problem and free them up for other issues. And I suppose that's true of all of you. And the way that technology will change what we all do is that it gives you the freedom to offer different services. I mean, Paul, where will AI, for example, fit into what you do in terms of making it easier for your staff that you have be able to offer more?
Well, it's really interesting. I was listening to Christina quite intently and very conscious of the fact that airports have gone through a bit of innovation, a bit of evolution, but actually I think what's needed is a revolution. Because you see, I think the thing is, we heard Peter talking earlier about the underinvestment in airports over the last few years. And I think that's been driven because in history, there has been a broken relationship between state ownership, between airlines' view of airports, etc. I mean, I worked for an airline and I came into the airport industry because I really felt that there was a disconnect that needed to be corrected. Airports had this sort of slightly arrogant view of, airlines send people to us, we sell them stuff, then put them on a plane. actually, we are an incredibly critical part of the entire aviation supply chain, and we need to be in partnership with everyone. And everyone needs to see that they are a critical part of this. And I think if you look at some of the way technology has impacted industries, look at retail, where everything's now bought online. Look at, the way taxis have been changed by Uber and Lyft. Look at the way eBay has enabled us to sell all the stuff that's hanging around that we never use anymore. The way that that's happened is companies have come into the space, they've said, right, let's separate process from customer and reassemble it into a more logical way that technology can deliver far more effectively and efficiently, and we're seeing that now. But I think what needs to happen, airlines, airports, government agencies need to work much more closely together. I mean, we are now trialing facial recognition for both combined immigration and check-in. So when you arrive at the airport, you literally have your face scanned, that's it. All you have to go through is security. And I think if that combination of process into a single, seamless, technologically backed process can be achieved everywhere, and we can link it all together, that's going to be a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, Deborah, given what we've talked about the restrictions and things like regulation, when you hear something like that, up and running maybe in Dubai, fill you with dread, hope, optimism, or, are you anywhere near being able to achieve that given regulation?
I love it. I love to see other airports that are having success. It's the rising tide does lift all ships. So it's great to see that ambition. Do I have optimism for it? I think that in the face of number one, the one side of the coin, in the face of rapid change, I think governments actually hunker down and they're more prone to be static than to actually scale and to move fast with the pace. And we find most industries have innovations, tools, and solutions that are there and at the ready, but regulatory environment and airport model, country model are the biggest preclusions to being able to enact that. So there's great lessons learned, I think, competitively as more and more countries, cities, and regions recognize that airports are a symbol of their ambition, of their capability. You get these economic impact studies that say billions and billions, but when they actually see how the airport and being well positioned can open up deals or precludes deals and businesses relocating there or expanding in their particular regions, that carries a lot of weight. So, I guess I'd say I have some, that's maybe one side of the coin. But the other for us is, when we are thinking about our future, our focus is on just pure scale, the ability to run our airports more efficiently using technology, and we're going to double down on that. We've done so already by being able to invest in companies like Asaya, who I see over here, which was a startup that uses camera vision to help predict gate turnaround time. Right, so we can do that, and we can multiply that 100 times and find ourselves as a much more efficient, technology-capable airport.
And Anis, that's what you do in terms of one of the solutions here. Maybe, how do we stop lost bags? How do we make sure that turnaround is quicker? How do we make sure that airlines and airports are not paying out compensation for delays and lost baggage? Are the conversations that you have now getting easier? Because quite clearly the financial reward for investing in something like you offer is greater than ever.
I don't think financial is the key point, because you have ROI. It's just a matter of embodying everybody, all the stakeholders, and to make sure that we are aligned and standardized on the same system. It's easy. It's a complicated word, but the solutions are easy. Making them work is much complicated. Not about the workforce, because it's easy to train people and to help them and remove the painful tasks, repetitive tasks, and make the job more attractive in order to have more people. So this is the easy part. It's more to make it work for everybody. So we have solutions, but most of the time we are too many stakeholders around the table, everyone, fighting for for itself, and it's not that easy.
Deborah.
No, I think it's great to have a panel with differing views. I think from particularly a North American airport model perspective, financials are a significant hurdle. And historically, there has not been a willingness for airport owners to actually charge for the infrastructure that's needed today, as well as the infrastructure that's needed tomorrow. And that is reflective. I mean, for so many years, United States airports, including LAX, right, which was one of the top 5 global passenger airports, and was always at the bottom of the worldwide rankings, right? Like literally 97th. And that's just because like the ecosystem is not aligned between government, airlines, and airport to actually make the investments and charge the system what's required. And so, I mean, I think we've got to really work through that issue. You know, Pearson, we had 15 years of sweating the assets in order to keep rates competitive. Rates didn't even increase with the rate of inflation, so we were behind. And now we find ourselves in this massive capital program catching up, which is more costly, not just monetarily, but from a competitiveness and a customer experience perspective. So we've really got to work through this model and find more ways of making the hard but bold and courageous decisions to make those investments and position. I think, you know, what's happening from a customer expectation and technology expectation is the 2030s are far different than the 2020s are. And so that scale and that pace, we're going to have to make investments, and we need to find new models of working together to enable that, especially financially.
Yeah, and Christina, are people coming to you and saying, look, how are you doing this? How are you able to deliver this? You know, what can they learn from the way that you've sort of thrown a lot up in the air and just, you know, going to see where it lands?
Right, but I think I liked what you said, Deborah, on the one-on-one interview when you were talking about, you know, what does that new worker look like, right? Do you need AI managers? We're looking at what is a smart airport operator. We're going to, for the first time, have a terminal that is smart. It can adjust temperature according to crowd size. It can alert, you know, if an escalator goes down, you know, you push out through some sort of technology, which we have chosen, you know, a series of work orders, and what happens if something breaks down? What does that smart airport operator look like? Because it's not what we have today. So in all of us thinking about how are we hiring and training while we're running the airport, right? So a lot of us are talking about, and we're doing it too, we're building while we operate. And we're building, you know, a brand new landside terminal up next to an airside terminal while our existing landside terminal is operating. You're operating on the live patient is what I like to say to everybody. And we can't get it wrong because there's a lot at stake. And it's the same thing with training. It's not like everybody's going to sign off on let's bring in 45 new people, you know, every month and add them to the payroll and get them trained and then figure out how to, you know, look at the future of work. We've got to do this while we're doing it, and I think that makes it a little more complicated also because we're all doing it one at a time. I don't see the industry in the airports. So I don't see us sort of looking at what's the skill set and how can we apply that into each of our own operations. So we're doing it the way everybody's doing it. We're figuring it out, and we're working with as many partners as we can to shortcut our process because we have a lot to learn.
I think the issue, historically, has been a clash between the way airports are owned and operated and the desire of the airlines to constantly put cost pressure. And I think the difficulty is how to respond to that. And the response actually is, I think, go away from infrastructure intensive and become technology intensive. And you know, those aren't just buzzwords. I mean, it's possible now with the same infrastructure, as I was saying earlier on, to get much, much higher rates of throughput. And to demonstrate this, I mean, in 2007, when I joined Dubai Airports, we had 32 million passengers and 5,500 staff. Now, we added a bit of infrastructure with Terminal 3, but we have the same 3 terminals that we opened in 2008. We don't really have much in the way of additional infrastructure. But this year we're going to do 93 million and with 1,800 staff. So the productivity we've now got is 6 times better than it was in 2008. with the same infrastructure, and the throughput has improved. And I think this is where I think the future is. We need fewer staff that are more highly trained, operating much, much better technology. And one of the issues, I think, is this sort of ivory tower attitude that exists across the entire airport supply chain. I mean, I think all of us have mentioned, difficulties with government agencies not being focused on the right outcome, but joining those together and trying to make them come to the party by suggesting that, we'll all be better if we treated the customer better, I think has had some traction. And I think the other thing is this issue of privacy. You wonder how much of that is, well, we control that data, and if I give it to you, I'm giving some of my power away. We actually do not need to know the detail of that customer data.
It's binary, isn't it? Yes
exactly.
Or no. Yeah.
We just want to say to border control, is this person okay to proceed or not? We just want a red or green. We do not need to know their shoe size or their dietary preferences. We just want to know, is it okay to proceed? And if we can have that relationship, then we can speed people up, use our infrastructure more intelligently, and reinvest more in the technology and infrastructure that we do have.
And it's how do people future-proof as well? If there are big investments that each of these airports are about to make in terms of what the future will look like, what they need to spend the money on now, what they need to build into their system, how do they make sure that they get it right? How do you make sure that the stuff that is being bought, ordered, implemented today, when it arrives at the airport in this big new terminal 5-10 years from now, that it's still relevant?
There is multiple ways to answer to this question, but I mean, if we have the technology, it's as easy. I mean, it should be as easy in normal life, like taking a taxi, like going to the office. We have all the documents, we have the technology. I can arrive, I can check in, I by myself. This is what we do right now. I can have a robot guiding me in the airport in order to optimize my experience, to have less frictionless experience, because it will optimize depending on the occupancy, the queue in certain ways, and providing me an experience to do shopping, to alert me when it's time to go to do my onboarding. This is something that exists already. It's easy to implement, so it's easy to understand this experience. It's hard sometimes to make it operational in the airport, because it means where I'm going to put all the robots, what they are going to do the rest of the day, who is going to pay for this robot. So most of the time now, I think as a passenger, sometime in the airport, what I expect is everything going well. And I'm ready to pay to make it going well. As you said earlier, I mean, it's when I take the plane, most of the time, something is waiting for me. And I just need to, I need to be right on time, to have my luggage, to have, and to not to be stressed about everything that could happen.
Yeah.
So once someone is guiding me, for an example, from A to B, and everything's fine, okay.
Yeah.
And it could help in handling the operations on the field as well.
Yeah. Do you want to jump in?
I mean, I think we're in such a high regulatory industry, and one that has a low tolerance for risk. I think that's existed, and I still face those challenges. We have to provide results, for the investments we make to the tune of billions. So we tend to go with what is tried and true, with maybe a hint of innovation and continual improvement. But we actually need to do is have a much larger risk appetite, and I really champion the airports that are doing that and are experimenting. We'll be looking at Schiphol's new baggage and robotics system, right, to understand, is there a future where, for once, all of the space and the investments required for baggage systems, can be more automated and more robotic beyond just, tilt tray systems. So, we've all got to, I think, do our part as large and leading airports, frankly, to experiment more. As we're building our interim terminal, there is going to be this opportunity to experiment with both check-in or check-in-less facilities and automation and removing some of the processes that exist today, whether it's security identification. So we need to experiment more, open up airports as living labs and places to experiment on small scale, so that then when we make those several billion-dollar investments in new facilities, there is some proven technology that we can adopt larger scale.
You jump in, and I'm going to get some questions, so you answer.
What I would say, I agree with you, Deborah, 100%. We have to build flexibility into the infrastructure, right? First thing, right? We're not a hub anymore, but if a hub comes back, you just add gates. So we are making sure that we're not going to have any development that precludes the addition of gates. The second thing is we need to look outside the industry. I am all for looking at the world's leading airports and the leading retailers and the leading customer service around X, Y, and Z. So I think that there's an opportunity to not just look at our own industry, but to bring people into it and say, how do you see it? What could you fix? Because a lot of times, especially any of you who have hired in a C-suite position from outside the industry, and somebody goes, why are we doing this? And you think, I don't know, you're right, let's fix it. There still is opportunity, I think, to improve, and a lot of legacy ways of working that I don't think have to remain. So I agree we need to be experimenting, but we need to be doing that by looking outside of our own industry as well as looking at the leaders in it.
Yeah. I think we've got to ask a fundamental question as airport managers. And that is, how many products and services do people consume around the world where we subject them to so many disaggregated processes whilst they consume our product, Why do we have check-in? In this day and age, once the airlines have your money, that should be the end of it. The rest should be just execution of the product. But we have check-in, we have bag tagging, we have security, we have immigration, then we have all of the airside process that we go through. Really, we need a more scientific and human look at this. Obviously, airport security and immigration has a major role to perform, but we can make them with new technology far seamless and more enjoyable for our customers. And I think it needs a fundamental root and branch look. We want a revolution. An evolution is not going to be fast or effective enough.
Let's jump into questions. I'm here at the back of the room. There's a man at the front, so I'll come to you in a second, but one here. So who are you and who's your question for?
Hi, good morning. My name is Raul Villeneuve. I'm from EIT Urban Mobility. My question's to 3 of the 4 of you working in airports. How do you assess the overall ecosystem? So what are you doing in terms of innovation and sustainability to connect the dots in terms of to encourage people to come to your airport in public transport or other forms of transport? So that's my question.
Thank you.
I can talk about that. We actually are building, I think, the world's first VTOL terminal, which is adjacent to the airport. We tried to get it almost in the airport, but the conflicts between normal aircraft and UAVs are a little bit too challenging. I think the idea is that the fundamental reason an airport exists is to facilitate the change between 2 alternate modes of transport, and that is the basic reason. And I think it's incredibly important for us to rethink what that's all about. I'm quite excited about the idea of using latent road capacity at night and getting someone like Hilton or Marriott to cooperate with Tesla to produce an autonomous vehicle on wheels with a hotel room in the back, so we can get into our hotel room at sort of 10 p.m. and wake up at our destination. 48% of all flights are for 500-mile sectors or less. And if it's really difficult to move to a sustainable technology, SAF, for all the optimism we have, is 0.1% of the fuel supply. And it's really difficult to keep pace, both with cost and volume, with just the growth in demand for Jet A1. So we do need alternative modes of transport. And I'm sure there's a lot of latent capacity that could actually be used to transform the way we look at mobility. And I think UAVs, as I said earlier, is a very exciting technology. It doesn't have the problems of having to mix with other modes on the ground. So I think it will be a very important contribution to personal mobility and the sustainability of it in the future.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the ecosystem working together, one of the, I think outcomes of the post-pandemic arena was being more transparent about system performance and demystifying and trying to educate the public more on what the ecosystem was and the various responsibilities. So providing information on baggage delivery, mishandled baggage rates, agency processing time, queue times, and overall performance, and we've put that available to the public now. So number one, educating and demystifying that and reporting, which again, I think is compelling for a number of those participants. But it's not enough to just say, well, they did that wrong or they did that great and, here's your information. I think, airports have a fundamental responsibility, whether we like it or not. If it happens and it's a poor airline experience and it's at your airport, it tends to get lumped in with this is your airport's particular problem. And so we do look at that whole ecosystem, and we've worked on both incentive and penalty regime measures to help the system perform better. But at the end of the day, we have to work with those partners and understand what their inherent challenges are, but set those ambitions together and try to work through them holistically to provide. I think, again, our industry does have significant threats to it. We've talked about a number of them today. We all need to own those threats, and we need to work together to ensure this industry remains strong, vibrant, and is growing for the long term.
Question down the front here. Let me run back and get my steps in. Hello, good morning.
Thank you. Well, thanks for great insights. My question is around stakeholders working together for more effective use of technology. So for instance, let's just look at ACDM. It's been great execution in Toronto Airport. I remember Air Canada, WestJet, all the airlines, airport talking together, making it happen. Now, in this, if we think today, yesterday, our industry, there is a lot of interest from airlines to move on beyond seat, experience, end-to-end experience, retail with NDC. Is this an opportunity now for our industry, the airlines and airports, to seize the moment? And then what we see in the air side, like ACDM, why not do it in the land side? For example, we talk about disruptive moments, something goes wrong. Christina, you were saying earlier, airport needs to do the best and so on. So does airline. For instance, is there an opportunity operations control centers, airline and airport cooperate? Or take another example, the robotics, integrate delivery robots, the food and beverage, the folks in the gates and so on and so on. Thank you.
I can just talk about something we have in an airway company, an airport in France. And what I had in mind is what you said earlier. We managed to do it because people thought as an entrepreneur. Just to keep it simple, let's try it. Let's do a trial. Let's start simple, easy, and then we will scale. So if you try to make it complicated from the beginning, you will never achieve or test anything at all. So simple, test, learn, and try again, and then add complexity. Otherwise, like you said, we will never have a revolution in something, in a facility that cannot move as fast as the technology and as the expectations.
I think one of the byproducts of increasing flow and increasing capacity without increasing infrastructure is that if things do go wrong and something interrupts the flow, you get a massive backlog very quickly. So rather than actually say, well, look, you need to build your terminals bigger to account for the queues that might build up, what we did in 2015 was established exactly what you described, an airport operations control center where every single stakeholder, it's vast, every single stakeholder is there, and we have every single information source displayed in real time, and all the decisions are made in that one location, and we can predict when we're going to have a problem and get people and systems mobilized to eliminate the problem before it occurs. That's the way of keeping the flow moving, and it's absolutely vitally important. And it's interesting, I think there are a lot of institutions around the world, not just airports, that haven't really cottoned on to this fact that technology gives us the ability to integrate control into one location, which is an incredibly important part of the ACDM journey.
Time for, do you want to jump? No, time for a couple more questions. So stick your hand up if you have one, but there's one here. So.
Hello, Joe Alicia, ED for Advanced Air Mobility in NEOM, and former airport director of Chicago O'Hare. The question I have is, how do you balance digital and technology on the operations and the integration for the passenger journey? There's many personas coming in and out of the airport, and in my opinion, sometimes it could be too much. And questions for all.
Can you just be a little more clear? What do you mean? What's too much?
Robotics, digital applications, different technologies
It's overwhelming. Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that the first question I ask when somebody says we can be more efficient, I say, for whom? Who are we innovating for? Who wins? And who doesn't? My mother is not walking through the airport with a phone. And she is not going to get served her flight notification, change of gate, on a phone. She just isn't. So, and we have a lot of folks who have mobility issues and are not native speakers of the language. And we have lots of different types of personas that we have to make sure that if we're innovating and we're creating efficiency, it works for everyone. It cannot just work for a certain amount of people. So I think that that is our responsibility. So every single time we have this idea around technology, which we are all for, around efficiency, my first question is, who wins? And what does it mean for everybody in the ecosystem? And what will it mean for how we operate if it goes wrong for a certain percentage of the population or a certain persona? So I think we have a responsibility to make sure that when we're thinking about technology, innovation, digital, that we are also thinking about what about the people who don't use it? How are they going to function in our facility, and how are we going to take care of them if something goes wrong? Because not everybody is a native. I think of myself. My son is a native speaker of tech, right? Of the iPhone. I'm a second language learner, right? When something goes wrong, I call him, and so. There are still a lot of people like that, and I think we are in a bridge where we have to make sure we're taking care of everybody.
I think in today's world of high technology, we have to remember to keep it simple. And can I have a show of hands? How many people use more than 10% of the apps on their phone? More than 10%, right? There's a few hands going up, one here. So not terribly many people. And I think the problem is we have overload. And I think what you were referring to is, we may have a baggage app. We may have a queue monitoring app. We may have this behind the scenes. We may have that behind the scenes. Actually, technology integration, I think, is more important than the technology itself. When Peter was talking earlier about Amsterdam and saying, look, we've got to fix the terminals. But I think there's some simple stuff, and he mentioned, making sure the AC's working, making sure the light bulbs are on. I think he needs to fix the signage as well. That's another basic thing to get right. And I think what we've got to remember is that the airport is an alien environment, and Christina's just described a very personal example of that. It's an alien environment for so many of our customers, and we have got to approach it with the simplicity that will make that environment less alien, more intuitive, and much, much easier for them to navigate. So let's remove as much as we can to make the journey simple. I think that's the way to achieve all of the goals that we're setting ourselves.
I promised I would finish on time. I'm 4 minutes late. I'm very sorry. I know you have networking and all big important meetings to get to. But I'm really grateful for your time, but especially to our panel. So please, could we say thank you to Deborah, to Paul, to Christina, and to Anis. Thank you so much. Thank you.